Hi there, I'm Alex, and welcome to the Ukes With Podcast. My guest this week is my favorite ukulele player of all time. This guy is the ukulele entrepreneur. He's the original gangster of the ukulele, in my opinion. This is James Hill. James, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. And it's great to see you.
It's great to do this. I mean, just before we start, I'll just say to the people at home, we've actually filmed this podcast once before, but various technical issues meant we had to do it again. And I cancelled on James so many times that by rights, he should not be here filming this. But the man has given me more chances than I deserve. So we're here and we are going to talk everything James Hill, starting with the UKEDS project, James.
hmm
Now, the UKEDS thing, many people I love the idea that will know about you, but you not this individual. Can you just give everybody the kind of Dragon's Den persona avatar thing, the ukulele? But
Yeah, the project just grew out of this the idea that maybe, just maybe, it's possible to make an album that everybody is invited to play on. Like that's really all it is. I mean, ukulele is such a participatory instrument. Um, we all know what it's like to sit in a jam session and feel that magic of kind of capilla and just being together and making music in the room. And then you go to record an album and it's just like, okay, now it's just me time. So everybody just stop playing and I'm going to record this album. I'm going to play these songs for you, but just sit and listen. And I've done that, and all of us who are in the business have done that, and we'll continue to do that. But I thought it was an interesting moment to try, especially because we were all around in the pandemic and people know what Zoom is now, and we're more accustomed to collaboration across distance.
Mhm.
Maybe now is the time to try to do a collaborative album with my friends and my fans, and something that I've wanted to do for years and years. Kind of split the difference between a concert and a workshop, because
Yeah.
it's like an album that's also a teaching experiment. And so my friend Chris, who I grew up playing ukulele with, Chris Parsons, out in Vancouver, he and I just started talking about this. It almost started as one of those things like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we, you know, and it just got more and more serious.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being this amazing musical journey with, what ended up being about 250 people all playing together on the album. And we're nearing the end of the process. It's hard to believe, but we're almost there. I mean, there's so many little things that I could talk about how, what worked, what didn't, what I might do differently next time, how I even had the time to create a community around these songs, because
Mhm.
most of the time when you're recording an album, all you're trying to do is just finish the songs. Like you're just trying to write the last lyric and nail down the last chord progression, and then boom, you got to get in there and record it. But we could get into all that if you want, and whether or not it's a blueprint for anybody else, I think is a big open question, or whether this was just kind of the perfect storm of things that came together, and it's a one-time offer. Those are open questions.
And the project itself has been going on for what, probably about 12, maybe 18 months now. And it's like an ongoing thing this whole time.
Yeah, it's not quite that long because we're doing one song a month. We took 1 month off. We're on song number 8. I think we started up in like June of 2022. Um, yeah, but it's been going for long enough that the people have really gotten to know each other, and it really has become like part album, part community, which was really the idea at the outset.
It's such a it's such a unique thing to the ukulele because the guitar world, for all of its kind of massive reach, just seems to lack that. Perhaps it's too big. With the
Mm.
ukulele, like you can get these pockets and these small communities. I've seen so many examples of that in the kind of, well, the 2 years I've been doing the podcast, really. So many of the guests rely on this sense of community spirit with the ukulele that kind of, I guess if you're like trying to stereotype it, you call it like that aloha spirit, but it's so much deeper than that. And
Mm.
the modern world and the pandemic, I've noticed that people who have used the ukulele as their hobby, they really, the social aspect of it, whether it's on Zoom or in the flesh, and it's great. And every person who's ever walked into my shop, you know, they play a ukulele, they have aspirations of doing something, whether it's performing or being in the studio. And how does the recording process work then? If people play on the album, then they record their bit at home, and then, you know, could you just talk a little bit about that?
Definitely, because that was one of those things going into this that we were like, I don't know exactly how we're going to do this. I'm sure we can do it. Everybody's walking around with a supercomputer in their back pocket. There's got to be a way to get everyone, regardless of their age or their tech savviness. There's got to be a way for them to at least get us something, and then we can try to work with that and to fashion it into some mix. And that's exactly what we did. We really left it open to people how they wanted to record. Some people have a almost professional recording setup.
Yeah.
Some people have a semi-professional recording setup, and some people just have literally their phone on a voice memo, and that's it. And we've got soup to nuts every time we put out a song, and we do a monthly rehearsal on Zoom. They get a session with me. We go through the song. I show them the parts that I've written for them. And that's one thing people sometimes don't understand, that their parts are written. Like I'm not saying, okay, now 250 people take a solo.
Yeah.
It's not like that at all. I mean, I wasn't that ambitious, you know. So there's always one singing part and one playing part, and they can do one or the other or both. They listen to my guide track on their headphones, and they press record on their phone or whatever they have. They're not lined up or anything. We line everything up manually later. It's a big job, but
that is a big job. Oh, I would not want to be the one doing that.
It's not super fun, that part of it, but it's a small price to pay for the overall product. Yeah. And I think if you burden people too much with like, okay, now everybody line up with 0. I want you to create a project in Logic or Cubase or Pro Tools. I want it to be this tempo. I want you to lock it to the grid and export it from this point. I mean, forget it. You know, you're cutting off a whole whack of the population who could be meaningfully engaged in this project, but you're scaring them off with science. And I didn't want to do that. And you send us your voice memo. We are going to make sure it gets in the mix, because that's the right thing to do.
Well, I mean, I really, really look forward to, I'm going to try and kind of put a little bit of a snippet in for people now before we kind of move on. But yeah, the UKEDS thing has really done it for me. And we haven't really talked about the avatar element of it, like the actual illustrations. How does that work? Have you got one illustrator who's created kind of X amount of heads?
Well, there were 1,879 heads to begin with, because we wanted to get the ukulele's birthday in there.
Yeah.
So we had 1,879 heads, and we onboarded about 250 or 300 people. Once the project is done, by the way, we're going to burn the ones that weren't sold. So if a person wants to get in and just have a collector's item before the album is finished, because at that point, all of the others will disappear, and it'll only be a set of however many we sold. Get in now while you still can. There's still time to actually be in the band. If you wanted to join the band, just go to ukeds.com. Like, you can still buy in for the last like 3 songs.
And what kind of price is that?
It was because we wanted to get the ukulele's birthday in there, so it was $187.90. Nice. So it works out to. We had to convert it to Canadian dollars because of our payment processor, but it was $187.90 US to buy in to the band for the entire year and beyond. The idea was to give people sort of this sort of special ticket they would keep with them for a long time, and maybe down the line we do a festival and they get a discount, or they might get special access to some coursework online, or we might get the band together, in a year or two and do a single, like the idea was to make it go beyond this one project. And that's why the NFT thing was appealing, because that is sort of, it's a ticket stub that's valid sort of forever, or at least as long as the internet exists. So that was the idea. But people honestly didn't, the NFT thing was never the heart and soul of the project. It was just how you got your ticket. And honestly, only a small fraction of people who signed up actually redeemed it for the NFT itself. We allowed people
Really?
to just sign up, and we would hold the NFT for them if they didn't have a wallet that they could store it in. And the vast majority of people just did that. And they didn't seem to care about the NFTs. They just wanted to be part of the band and wanted the musical experience. And I'm glad we did it that way, because again, we would have missed out on involving a lot of people if we'd really made it focused on the technology, which we didn't.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not a cynic at all. As someone who's been in bands for, I mean, like 22, 23 years, just trying to find something that includes people, that's unique, that gets people talking, and at the core of it, like the good value for money. Like I had no idea about the price, but it's less than I assumed, because I'm guessing, does that include those Zoom lessons leading up to learning the tunes? I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I think, I really hope that you continue that project and it becomes something that you do carry on with, because the amount of people I know that hopefully will see this and then they'll go, well, I wish I'd seen this from the start, you know.
Yeah.
And a bit, you know, seamlessly, you mentioned 1879, and you're wearing a hoodie that just constantly reminds you of the ukulele's birthday. So could you tell us a little bit more about 1879 and why you're wearing that hoodie?
I'd love to, and why I have that sign, glowing behind me.
Yeah.
1879. I've always been into art, and to finish answering your last question, I don't know if this is a good thing to put out there or if this makes me look cheap, but I did all the UKED's artwork myself. You know,
Good.
I didn't hire a person to do the artwork. I did that. You know, that was an art project for me. And a lot of people that think they look hokey, and a lot of people love them. And I got to show you. Hold on, I got to show you, because UKEDs have gone nuts making stickers, and they do look really good on stickers. Hold on one sec. So this is totally UKED's initiative. They've got this like global sticker trading ring where they make stickers of their UKEDs, and then they like send them to each other in the mail, and I've got this little case, you know, covered in them now. And I never thought that we would do that with the UKEDs.
Oh my God, I love that. And if any of your UKEDs are watching, I collect stickers and I collect memorabilia. I would be eternally grateful if anybody reaches out to me at Southern Ukulele Store and sends me some, or, you know,
yeah,
even if it's
that'd be awesome.
Even if you send me like a version of it that I can get printed or put on a poster or something for the shop, I think that is such a good idea. I love it.
They go so well on cases, and they're so colorful. And it was a project that I've always been interested in, generative art. So where the artist creates the conditions for the work, but then just winds it up and puts it down, and the work kind of generates itself. And that's how the UKEDs were created. So I created all of the. It's like playing a digital game of Mr. Potato Head. You know, you create all of the features, and then you load them up into this program, and you say how many you want and what variations you are interested in exploring, and how likely each one is to actually pop up, and then you run the program, and it sort of assembles all of these things. And I thought that was a really interesting project, and that's there were a lot of combinations that I never personally would have put together that I think look really cool. And you know, on a side note, I'm really interested in generative music, and I have projects that are side projects that have something or sometimes nothing to do with ukulele, that are generative music projects where you create songs by. How do I describe it? You create the parts of the songs, and then you sort of let them jumble up against each other, and the performers don't know how it's going to unfold in the performance. It's especially challenging when you've got this when you've got a melody that you're singing over top of these generative harmonies. Yeah. And it's constantly reharmonizing itself, but you're having to hold the same melody that you always sing over top of it. I mean, imagine if you were singing like Country Roads in a jam session, but everybody played different chords every time. Like you'd still sing the Country Roads melody. It really does your brain in, and I find it so refreshing to constantly be navigating. It's kind of like how a surfer must feel a little bit. Like you're always surfing, but the wave's always a bit different. You
Yeah.
can't just phone it in and go like, oh yeah, I've done this before. I'm just on a board and this is a wave, so bada bing, it's done. You're always having to be very, I guess I would say you got to be present, in that moment and be with that harmony and sort of ride that harmony with this melody. The melody's like the surfboard and the harmony's like the wave. That to me is just been a really amazing musical journey, and none of that music is out there yet. It's something that my wife and I are working on as a duo, but it's coming out soon, and there's some ukulele in it. I'm also playing fiddle, and this relates, I guess, to the ukeheads, because the idea of generative art that you don't micromanage, art that you grow from seed, but then you sort of let it be its own thing. You don't end up putting every hair on its head. You don't end up putting every pixel in exactly the place that you think you want it. You allow the art to literally just unfold itself based on the, some loose parameters that you create. And I've been into this music since I was a, teenager, and finally finding a way to bring it into my professional life has been, really satisfying.
Oh, such an in-depth answer.
What was the question? Did you ask me about my shirt?
I don't even know, but it's fine. If the question was too far away from it, I'll just cut around it and ask a question that's relevant. But it also,
that's funny.
You talk about your wife, Anne, and I've been lucky enough to meet you guys quite a few times and chat to Anne, and I guess I just kind of want to selfishly talk about one of your past albums. One of the most important albums to me, kind of really helped me with my personal interest in the ukulele, was your old silo album. And I was fortunate enough that I've been around on the ukulele longer than most now, and I kind of followed your career from kind of Man with a Love Song. Was that the name of the album? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Your old silo album for me was just an absolute turning point for the ukulele. It was the first accessible ukulele album where I would get people who were not into the ukulele or perhaps dismissed the ukulele and kind of said, give this a go. And for me, it really got me into kind of Americana, but that kind of early country, and I just absolutely love that album. And
thanks.
I guess the reason I wanted to bring it up is because your most recent course it's tailored to that kind of thing. It's focusing on that kind of thing. Like, you're a jazz guy, really. I can see it. I mean, you look like a jazz guy, but also you teach jazz in such an inspiring and enthusiastic way. But with Americana, that's your kind of recent course, and the old silo album was that kind of thing. What's your history with that, and how do you relate that into your teaching?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because it's funny how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Obviously, this is not an insight that, the way you feel about yourself is different than the way people see you. And because it's interesting to me, because I've never thought of myself as a jazz player. I feel like I'm a jazz tourist. I am interested in jazz. Like, I do like to go there. I don't live there. Yeah, if you know what I mean.
You've phrased that so well. That's very accessible. Yeah.
So I mean, and I don't want to pretend that I do, because that's a whole lifestyle. I mean, to really devote yourself, body and soul to jazz is a life's work. And I have devoted myself, I would say, I'll give myself some credit to say I've devoted myself to bringing jazz onto my ukulele in a meaningful way, and trying to bring others to that place with their ukuleles. That's a very specific slice of, how I interact with jazz. I love jazz harmonies on the ukulele. I love the way they feel. I also love how accessible they are, and how it's always so surprising to people that G6 is easier to play than G. Yeah. That C6 is easier to play than C. that, G9 is easier to play than G7. Like, people just freak out when they realize that they've been working so hard to play B flat, and then B flat major 7 is like a holiday for them. That is such a fun thing to do.
Learning, doesn't it, as well? Because
I think so.
You don't, like, for me, like, I was a guitarist for years before I hit that stride on the ukulele, and now I'm kind of all about major sevenths and those flattened sevenths and those chord progressions and how they work. And the ukulele improved my guitar playing, and my guitar playing improved because my ukulele. I love it. But you're
for sure.
You picked up a uke, so you mean business. So yeah.
I love jazz harmonies, the way they come out on the ukulele, because I'm not going to lie to you. I find jazz intimidating just like everybody else. But what I love about what the ukulele does is I don't have to know what I'm doing to make beautiful sounds. I've always approached music in a music first way. I like this sound. I actually don't know what those chords are right now. I could figure them out. I know that one's B flat 6. But, I can figure those chords out, but it's more just like I know the shapes and I know how they move from one to the other. Jazz on the ukulele is very geometric. It's just like this one goes to that one, and that finger goes to that one, and do. In some ways, it's much more symmetrical and geometric than even just playing country roads. Country roads, you have like a 1-finger chord, and then you've got this 2-finger chord in a completely different configuration. That's F, and then you want a G or a G7. Well, that's a 3-finger chord in yet another different configuration. And jazz is like, no, we're just gonna have like one shape, and then we're gonna have a second shape. And guess what? You can just use that like a stamp, and just like stamp that on any fret. Put it there, put it here, put it here, and then resolve it occasionally. And then you're like, that's jazz. I find, as intimidating as jazz is, it begins with the sound. And you can almost feel the history of jazz where people are like, let me take that little 2-5 chord progression. Let me just move it over here and see what happens. Oh, cool. Now let me move it over here and see what happens. And it becomes this kind of like this way of almost teleporting through different keys. But you don't really have to know what you're doing to fundamentally connect to jazz. In some ways, you have to know more what you're doing to fundamentally connect to You Are My Sunshine. You know what I mean? And so I've always found jazz as this amazing sort of wormhole pedagogically, and I love that. But what was the question?
Americana. I didn't ask you about jazz. Like a proper jazzer, though, you ignored the Americana bit and went straight for the jazz.
But I circled around to it eventually. But you see, Americana, I feel, is really kind of where my heart is. That music,
it just lives with me all the time. I mean, when I hear this kind of this like lonesome sound, better if it's in tune, but the hollowness of that sound, for me personally, it just like it captures my mood. It captures the questions that I have, the sort of the void of existence. Like this music is so deep. There's only 2 notes in that chord, but somehow it sort of it helps me to express something that I don't have the words for, in a way that other styles of music don't. And when you start to get into something like clawhammer and the sort of hypnotic rhythmic,
Nice.
When people ask me, what do you play when you sit around and just play ukulele for yourself? It's small music that takes me to, big places. When I don't have to project to a big audience, it's that kind of small bubble of sound that I like to lose myself in. And I find, I'm just drawn time and time again to these simple songs that say so much. And that to me is the essence of Americana.
I mean, I get it. I do. And it's great to see you teaching that. There's quite a lot of the kind of basic country kind of, but how to kind of busk your way through country music on the ukulele. But what I've really enjoyed is about a week ago, just for anyone listening to this at home, like James sent me kind of a login to have a look at his Americana course. And I did not have a lot of free time. I had kind of one evening to have a look at it. But what I loved about the course, and something I'd not seen from other teaching experiences, was you get an email every day the first week of the course with James encouraging you and kind of trying to push you in the right direction with the course. And I really love that. I love that when I eventually got to look at it, it felt really perfectly kind of choreographed. The emails work so well with it. And I love that. I love it's a tiny extra touch, but it's something that really made me kind of go, yeah, I kind of get why James is the James Hill. Like, you've always had like I don't know, like there's an element of I'm quite happy to kiss your ass, James, because I've been I've been working with ukuleles for 14 years this year, and there was a point about 5-6 years in where I was kind of like, I don't know if this is for me. And both times I've met you and seen you perform live at the shop, and times I've come across you and your music, you're one of those key things that kind of keeps me invested in the ukulele and reinvigorates me. So to see that come across in your teaching of your courses, I think that's fantastic. And I really urge the people out there, if you're into kind of ukulele tuition, it's not just the paid stuff. James and I are talking about all this stuff that he does that you can get involved in, but I actually really love the YouTube channel. James has got probably about 50 or 60 different tips and tricks on his YouTube channel. There's a couple of videos there that are really quite iconic now in the ukulele sphere as things that people have kind of adopted. And I can only imagine for you how funny it must be sometimes. Like on a small scale, I get people quote things I've said back to me from YouTube videos, like advice about ukuleles, which is my gig. People saying, oh, I've read online or I've seen that it's this. And I'm like, that's me. Like, I can't imagine in your lessons day to day how many times your information has recirculated and found its way back to you.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a good feeling to know that you're part of the conversation. I'm also pretty in touch with how entwined my teaching is with my teachers. Like, I never won the lottery or I never seemed to win at bingo or like win the door prize at the church dinner or something. I consider myself a fortunate person, but the real, like, one of the main strokes of luck that I've had in my life has been the teachers that I've had. Like, how many great teachers can you reasonably expect to have in a lifetime? If you get, it's like saying how many great friends are you likely to have? This before Facebook, the average number of friends that somebody would say that they had was like, the average in the United States was something like 1.5. If you average it out, how many really great friends do you have? You're lucky if you have 2. You're extremely lucky if you have 3. It's the same with teachers. If you can look back on your life, especially your early days as a kid growing up, and say that you had 2 or 3 life-changing teachers who opened your eyes and your ears and your heart to things that you didn't know were possible and inspired you to explore things for yourself, and really dig in. I mean, I would say that I had probably 10 of those teachers You know, it's a ridiculous embarrassment of riches. You know, when I look back on it, the number of teachers who inspired me, you know, starting with Jamie Thomas, my very first ukulele teacher, you know, Peter Luongo, who I was with for many years in the Langley Ukulele Ensemble. I had teachers at university, Giorgio Magnanensi for new and improvised music, Bob Pritchard for, you know, music theory, and it just kind of goes on and on. Like, how many of those teachers can one person have? And I feel like that for me was like a windfall. It was like winning the lotto. And of course, the sort of probably the number one for me is Chalmers Doan, who now I live just 15 minutes down the road from him. And he was the guy who started the Canadian ukulele program in the schools in the 1960s. So he really was sort of the first mover for Canadian ukulele. And now I get to play pool with him, you know, every Friday and write books with him. And I can't even tell anymore where my ideas and my innovations in teaching and education end, and sort of the influence of all of those teachers begins. I mean, they all kind of blend together. It's a long way of saying, I can't, you know, I give myself some credit. I do think I've innovated some nice things over the years, and maybe, you know, explored some new territory for ukulele and for the way we teach ukulele. But man, is it ever entwined with two other generations of people who have been teaching the ukulele and who I've been learning from either directly or by osmosis for, you know, my entire life. So I feel pretty fortunate and very humble about the whole thing.
Do you know what? It comes across in how you teach. It's very, very, you know, widespread. And I'm very conscious that we need to wrap this up because we've got about 2 minutes left on the Zoom call. And the question I want to ask you is the question I asked you last time that I was really keen to share with the world. And we've had a completely different conversation this time. Like,
that's right.
We talked about completely different things last time, and that conversation is lost forever. But I cherish it. Before we go, I just want to say, of the current crop of ukulele players, and I would say from the kind of pandemic times onwards, there's been quite a few. I mean, are there any players that really stand out to you that you would say to people, check this person out if you want to get into the ukulele now?
It's a kind of a huge question. Some of the names are going to escape me, but I've been hanging out a little bit more on Instagram than I ever have because I do see the ukulele community kind of congregating there, for sure. And in terms of, education, I mean, for me, the jury's still out on whether or not you can really have a meaningful, learning experience in like a 20-second clip. I'm not totally sold on that yet, but I do see people like Bernadette doing some really consistent and good quality work. And, Ricky, just showing up for people, leading the sort of virtual jam on Instagram. I really love what Four String Boy is doing, Sammy, because I think he's really bringing this sort of, yes, we can all play together, but I'm also going to write original music. I think it's incredibly important to write original music for the ukulele, to keep the voice of it evolving, not just to say, hey, look, we can imitate that thing over there, but look, here's something we can do that you all should be imitating because this sounds best on ukulele, just sort of staking some ground for ukulele musically and sonically. And I think Sammy's doing a really, really nice job at that, getting people excited about original work. And, he's great and creative and hip and fun. And it's kind of doing what I'm trying to do with UKEDS, where he's writing original stuff, but he's involving other people. I love that.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're going to get cut off the call. But
I can go on.
Sammy is, for me, he's one of my favorites. I like his slightly kind of modern punk take on the ukulele. He's got this unique way of doing it. James, thank you so much, my friend. Like, let's do this again in a year and see where we're at. And let's in the meantime, I'm going to put all the important links in the video. And selfishly, if you really enjoyed this, please do look at my patreon.com/ukeswithalex. So that was the moment that I cut off James Hill because I ran out of time. But I just want to sign off by saying that James Hill is one of the most important living ukulele players out there today. He's probably the first ukulele player of the 2000s that's really helped jumpstart an entire generation of players, along with Jake, of course. And there will be other names that I'm not mentioning. But for me, seeing James Hill innovate on the ukulele now for the past 14 years and watching him get more involved with the current crop of players is an absolute joy. Please do take a look in the description at the various things that James has done. I'm just going to read the email now that James has sent me. James is just James did a little sign off at his end, so I'm going to play that for you now. Thank you so much, folks. I will see you again on the other side.
And now I'm just sitting here on my own. Alex is gone, but the mics are still on. So wherever you are, Alex, thanks for the interview. Great to catch up with you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.